Hello, I am back once again with the reveal of a new MMO. Am I in a bizarro world? What is going on? Who would have thought? Although frankly, I'm not really surprised because I do think we are on the cusp or in the midst of a resurgence of the genre, not likely a full-blown return to form of the style of MMOs we saw pumped out during that post-WoW gold rush of 2005 to 2010. But nevertheless, I expect a massive uptick in the shared open world, social MMOs, and MMO lights as they fall perfectly in line with the live service always online train that is moving full steam ahead. But that is a topic that deserves an entire video in and of itself, and I'll get to that eventually. As for today, we are talking about Perfect New World, a name that I'm sure Amazon is thrilled about. While this isn't likely to be a savior of the genre, it is nevertheless a new game for us to check out. It has some interesting systems from what we've seen, and we're gonna get to play this very, very soon with a test scheduled in just a couple of weeks. Now, Perfect New World is a spiritual successor or follow-up to Perfect World, an Eastern MMO from 2005 that got an international release in 2008. For a lot of people, this was sort of like a free alternative to World of Warcraft. In fact, I remember between online and people that I knew, seeing a bunch of people and having a bunch of people be like, hey, you should check out Perfect World. And I went, looked at screenshots, and my conclusion was, nah, I'm good. But despite what I thought, there do seem to be a lot of people who have very fond memories of the original game, as it had some interesting things going for it, including a rather solid PvP system that was at least prior to them burying the game with over-the-top pay-to-win, which, you know, looking back on it, was a sign of things to come. Now, the new game, Perfect New World, was first officially revealed 2 years ago at a press conference, during which they showcased a few trailers. They said that this was a new MMO based on the Perfect World IP and would feature an open world, action combat with combos and active dodging, a big departure from the original tab targeting of the first game, and that the game was planned to release on both consoles and PC with a separate mobile version. The early trailers they showcased gave us a look at the flight system with these winged characters. This was a notable feature of the first game. We also saw some shots of an open world, a few combat sequences, and some character model close-ups. So after the reveal, things went quiet for a whole 2 years. So just 2 straight years of absolutely nothing, up until a few weeks ago, when Perfect New World got an updated reveal trailer, a store page on Steam, and the announcement of a planned 2023 worldwide release. And then just the other day, we got nearly 9 minutes of gameplay footage that showcased quite a lot of the game's various systems, the combat in action, what the world looks like. And you know what? As cynical as I went into researching this game, there's actually some pretty cool things here. So let's dive into what we know about Perfect New World. Starting with the world itself, from what we've seen, this looks like it's going to be a mix of open world and instance content. A lot of the gameplay that was shown does look to have some clear defined boundaries, but also there have been plenty more clips that do imply a more open world space, open world areas. That player city that players fly into at the end of the trailer looked super dense and actually really reminded me a ton of the big city in Guild Wars 2 End of Dragon expansion. I love the verticality here and the density of all of this. We've also seen somewhat look to be smaller towns that are probably scattered about the game's open zones and or world. And since we're talking about the world, I just gotta say, the environments are on point, at least some of it. This is probably what I think just looks best out of everything that they've shown. Really cool looking locations. We've seen shots of like these floating platforms. There's a variety of different caverns, caves, and ancient looking structures and statues. Really cool set pieces here. Also dungeon and or boss fight entrances. They kind of look like the fog gates that you get in Dark Souls. And even just some of the plain old open space that it's on display, the environment, the hills, the foliage. I think it all looks real good. I think it's a pretty slick looking game in terms of the explorable play space. Now let's talk about the combat. So as mentioned, the original game was a tab target MMO, whereas Perfect New World looks to be full on action combat. It does have target locking where you can focus on a single enemy, and then beyond the basic attacks and skills, there's also a combo system that lets you link different attacks to achieve bonus effects and or damage. So depending on like which abilities you use and when you use use them in a combo, it's going to result in a different finisher that applies a different effect or has a different damage multiplier. This actually reminds me a ton of the combo system in ArcAge, which I always really liked. You would have a variety of skills that would have like their base abilities, but then there would be a combo effect where if a certain condition is applied, like a certain debuff, or if you have a certain buff, the skill gets an additional effect. And then you add this in between the weaving of different attacks going in and out to form these combos. I mean, it sounds pretty cool. What I like is that I think it looks great. I mean, honestly, some really, really good looking attacks and skills. The animation work here, I think, is solid. It is a little heavy in terms of like, boy, there can be a lot going on, but it kind of seems as well like the pacing is tuned down enough compared to some action games where it doesn't feel too relentless and over the top. Like, yes, we do have some big animations, some big like particle effects going on, but it's also at a pace that I think is digestible. What I dislike is it seems in some of this footage to take like 15 plus seconds for you to take out a single normal looking enemy. Maybe some of these things are elites or bosses or mini bosses, who knows, but the air juggling here that's lasting like 5 to 10 seconds, that's a bit too much for me in an MMO. It's fine like full-on action games like a Devil May Cry or whatever, but it's a little much, and I hope the consistent combat isn't like this, and I hope fighting normal enemies isn't like this. If this is what it's like fighting elites or something, if it takes 15, 30 seconds to kill an elite, whatever, okay? But I hope normal enemy combat isn't like this, because it's a bit too much. It's a bit too long of a time to kill. But in general, I actually think the combat looks pretty good. Like, I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't expecting too much going into researching Perfect New World, but I was pleasantly surprised after really paying attention to how the combat looks. I do think it looks pretty good. Let's talk about some of the systems and what we can expect for content. PvE, you know, most of what they've shown for the PvE has looked to be open world engagements against normal and or elite NPCs. However, they have mentioned, and they did briefly showcase the existence of group dungeons, specifically this one called the Lost Temple. The shot opened up with what looks to be a combat arena, either an elite or a boss standing in the middle of this area in front of a large portal, and then surrounded by what seemed to be a group of ads. Then we saw some sort of objective thing where players were passing a lightning charge from one to the other and then carrying that charge to like an artifact, which then opened the door. And then we also saw this sequence where players had to dodge boulders rolling down a narrow path. How very RPG of them, and it's pretty cool. There's been a variety of boss fights on display as well, actually quite a few of them, and I do think there are some really cool looking designs here when it comes to how the bosses appear. No idea about mechanics and stuff because we haven't seen any of these fights in a long enough sequence. It's all been pretty short clips in and out, but I like the look of the bosses. I think they look neat, and I will note as well, some of these boss fights appear to be instants while others seem to be clearly out in the open field, which open world bosses, always a good time in an MMO. Also, always a good time, PvP, and the game will have PvP. In particular, they showcased arena fights. There was like 15 to 20 seconds of some 1v1 combat, and I think this looks really good. As I mentioned earlier in the combat section in general, while it is an action combat game, this one-on-one encounter didn't look so over the top or way too fast-paced like I feel, say, something like Black Desert Online is. I think the pacing looked good. I think the fight looked good between the two players, and this seems like a PvP engagement that I would want to engage in. I should note as well, the original Perfect World had open world PvP, and is actually one of the things that people kind of speak fondly to when they talk about this game. So I'm assuming and hoping that that will return in Perfect New World as well. But maybe even more interesting to me than the basics of the combat and the fact that there's PvE and PvP in this game were some of the other activities and systems that they showcased. There was actually a bunch of non-combat challenges. This particular thing called Mechanopolis showcased jumping puzzles and or obstacle courses. We saw characters zipping around with this water tether looking grapple hook and sprinting at a very high speed, jumping gaps, dodging hazards, and collecting these orbs with all sorts of stuff going on. It's like a parkour challenge encounter. This actually seems really, really neat. And this sort of like non-combat stuff in MMOs, I think, is pretty important, and I do appreciate what they're showing here. We also saw a few examples of puzzles, like there was one with a character moving these giant spheres onto pressure plates heights, which then raised a bridge cutting off a waterfall, presumably opening up access to another spot of wherever they were. And as mentioned earlier, this game does have flying, and we've seen a few displays of that. It actually seems more like gliding than actual flying. Like, it reminds me of gliding in Arcade. However, the original Perfect World had full-on flight where your character could just go everywhere. I actually kind of hope that they just go with the gliding, because I feel like the unrestricted flying for characters, I just don't prefer that in MMOs. I think it can really shrink the feeling of the world and some of the immersion that comes with that. But gliding, I actually think is really cool because it involves some sort of planning, right? Where you need to get up to an elevation to soar to a spot, and there can be some fun moments when it comes to that. At least that was my experience with gliding in Arcade and gliding in Firefall as well. So, and the game also has this system of Spirit Beast where you've got these like ethereal creatures out in the world, and you fight them or you sync up with them or something, and this basically unlocks new unique abilities. It just seems like it's a thing where you'll pick what Spirit Beast has the skill that you want, the attack or the buff or whatever it is, and then that's the Spirit Beast you attune yourself with. However the system works, it's just conceptually is kind of neat as another layer, another thing to engage with. Exploration seems pretty big here. We've seen examples of mounts, which will no doubt be for sale in the cash shop, and various types of traversal things. Like I said, there was that tether looking like water grapple hook. The game's got some sprinting, and I think it has a double jump as well, or at least there are certain areas in which double jumping will be enabled. Some pretty cool traversal here. They talked about random world events. They didn't really showcase much of this. We saw combat encounters, but world events not unexpected or surprising in an MMO. They showed some examples of like clearing a corrupted area with this character like interacting with this thing or completing an objective, which then changed the play space. Classes, they've revealed 3 of them so far. The Gale Blade is this rogue-like dual dagger, quick and agile character who excels at fast, continuous attacks and airborne combos. Berserker wields a greatsword that transforms into an axe. The animations and attacks with this character look super sick, and they make use of charge attacks as well, which you can load up for big damage. Apparently, Berserkers are good for AoE clearing. And then the Mystic Sword is said to be a strong mid-range attacker with a sword that launches out beams and flames. Now, while the Steam page only mentions those 3 classes, through the FAQ on the official Discord, they do imply there will be more, saying that for the closed beta test, there are only 3 classes available, but please look forward to more classes in further test and the official version. I saw some reports that the game was going to be launching with only 3 classes, but that does not appear to be the case based on what they're saying here. There's going to be a talent system, and of this, they said by selecting different talent branches, you can alter the effects of your existing skills and the energy mechanics of your class, creating a variety of personalized combat styles. This basically just sounds like you pick talents that will alter your skills. Pretty straightforward system. But they also emphasize that there is a wide variety of different combo types, which they said have unrestricted skill releases and a wide variety of combos that give you a constraint-free combat experience, allowing you to develop your own fighting style. I do think here they're just referring to the fact that there are different combo skills, and then depending on which combo skills you use with the things that they combo with, you're going to get different effects. It's just, they're basically just describing a combo system. Character creator, this seems to be just in line with most Eastern MMOs nowadays, meaning that there are tons of customizations down to the exact like placement, size, and distance between all of the different parts of your body, everything on your face, just lots and lots of detailed creation, not that I particularly care, but it is there for those who do. And I do believe that is basically it of what we know when it comes to everything that we've officially read by them when it comes to press releases and announcements, but then also what was on display in the various trailers that we've seen. Let's talk about my overall thoughts. So when it comes to what I like, the things that I think are promising, like I said, I think the combat looks really, really good, especially the animations, the spells and the attacks, everything looks solid. Seems like a fun action combat system that isn't too fast-paced, that isn't too over the top. Looks pretty solid. I also thought there were some real interesting looking environments, cool spaces to explore, especially if this game does end up in fact being full on open world or even open zone. And I actually like the overall look of the game visually. While it does appear a little dated, I think it has a pleasant appearance. It seems just like a pleasant space visually, and the non-combat systems. I love it. Like the obstacle courses, the parkour stuff, the puzzles, the traversal stuff, the spirit beast system, the flying, which I hope is gliding, but whatever it is. There's some cool things on display here from what little we've seen. There are definitely some early concerns though. The frame rate in the gameplay trailer was abysmal, like absolutely garbage, really, really bad. Some sections appear to dip into the single digits, if not at least the teens. I mean, it looks super rough. And this trailer was just released a few days ago, and they have a playtest planned very soon. I hope whatever they recorded for this trailer is a very old build, because otherwise the feedback from the upcoming test is going to be, dude, this game runs like garbage. We'll see. Second concern, it is likely to be pay to win, almost without question. 100%, I'm assuming this game is going to be very pay to win, because the original game was very pay to win. Might not be at launch, but it will most likely be eventually. I'll also say some of the aesthetic is just not my vibe, I guess. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, on top of that, it does look a little dated, but some of the character design just not really up my alley. Also, I am not expecting a ton of innovation with this game. At least they haven't displayed anything. While I do like the non-combat systems, everything else about it seems pretty bare bones basic. I don't know, I don't mean bare bones and like lacking content because we don't know, but I just mean pretty simple and straightforward systems. Oh, and finally, did I mention that it will almost certainly be pay to win? Because it'll almost certainly be pay to win. So I dug around, because I didn't have a ton of experience with the original game, but I dug around and found some examples of what sort of pay to win systems the original Perfect World had, and boy, they don't sound good. So evidently, natural health and mana regeneration in that game was absurdly low. Like, after fighting 2 to 3 enemies, you would have to sit down for around 10 minutes in order to fully regen your health and mana. 10 minutes. Or the other option is if you paid $5, you could purchase these charms that will automatically refill your health and mana whenever they reach 50%. How awfully convenient, huh? Yeah. On top of that, they said that the way healing worked in the game, if you wanted to be efficient in any group content, like running dungeons or whatever, it would cost you roughly $10 an hour worth of mana charms is what you would have to purchase. $10 an hour. You want to heal? Not only is healing like a thankless job, right? But you'd imagine having to pay $10 an hour to heal and then have your tank and DPS crapping on you the whole time. What an absolute nightmare. What's worst of all, though, is that this game, like many Eastern MMOs, features a pay-to-win gear upgrading system. You had to purchase refining orbs in order to upgrade your gear to the highest tier, and I saw some people claiming, again, I don't have first-hand experience, but I did see people claiming you could spend anywhere between $30 and $60. No, $1,000, $30,000 and $60,000 in refinement to upgrade your gear, and you still might not end up with the maximum level of end game gear. So that's pretty rough. Someone said they knew someone who remortgaged their home and they still didn't have the best gear in the game. It's awful, but holy crap. I remortgaged my house and I still don't have the best gear in this garbage game. What a nightmare. Anyways, I'll say this. I'm going to approach this game like I did something like Bless, right? I'm going to keep my expectations very, very low, but I would love to be surprised. And I gotta say, as I put this video together and the more that I looked at all the footage, it looks better than I was assuming it was going to look. So I think that's promising, if nothing else. And the good news is we're going to get hands-on time and get to play this very, very soon. They're going to be running a closed beta test in just a couple of weeks. What they're calling their exploratory CBT is happening on May the 4th. So between now and I think a week or two from now, you can register to try to get access to this. There's not guaranteed access, but you fill out a questionnaire and you'll get an email or something if you were invited. But yeah, there's a test running in roughly 3 weeks from now. It is going to be under NDA, so don't expect a ton of details to come out. There'll probably be some leaks, but you won't see a bunch of coverage of talking about first impressions and stuff. I am really hoping to jump in and play because it seems like it's gonna be one of the MMOs of all time. We'll say that much. But there are some really cool things. I do think combat looks great. I like those non-combat systems as well. Everything else, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But supposedly they have said that this game is releasing in 2023. One of the MMOs to add to the list that are coming soon, right? We'll see. But yeah, there you go. That is Perfect New World. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the vid, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.